Welcome to Experience Means Business, a podcast by Adobe Professional Services.
Hello, I am Elliott Wiener, part of the Adobe Services Marketing team the Adobe Professional Services team, your host for our content supply chain podcast series on our Adobe Professional Services Experience Means Business podcast channel. I'm so excited to be here. I've been working with this amazing group for, it seems like, multiple years, but it might be a little bit less than that for some of you. So you're in tune for a great discussion around value and how we showcase the value for content supply chain optimization.
Hi, my name is Ann-Katrin Rosa. I'm a business architect in the Professional Services pre-sales team. I'm based in Europe, in Munich, Germany, to be exact. And I was working as a project manager for 5 years with our delivery teams and then moved to the role as a pre-sales consultant. And just having a lot of fun discovering the worlds of our prospects and customers to see how we can make them even more better, more efficient, and really take them on the journey to a great adoption of our beautiful products.
And hi, everybody. I'm Doug Kincade. I'm a principal strategist in the Digital Performance Strategies Group, specializing in content strategy. So some of what I do is value mapping for big content projects, and some of what I do is laying them down and making them work. So we can talk it both ways.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Julian Bagdahn. I'm a principal solution architect in the European Solution Architect and Business Architect organization. I am based in Hamburg, Germany, and I work mostly with all things AEM and content. That means I'm either on the technical side, working out future architectures or technical architectures around everything DX, if you want, digital experience, or I'm working on the business side of things, talking about content supply chain and general improvements around your organization. I'm working with Adobe now for almost 6 years, and I have way over a decade experience in digital experience itself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathryn Brown. I'm a business architect, also part of the solution architecture organization along with Julian. And I've been at Adobe a little over 5 years. I've spent all of my time in professional services, first as a campaign consultant and then as a digital strategist, mostly focused on organizational design and operating models. In my current role, I help customers think about how to phase transformation as a business architect. So in our world, we tend to think in terms of value streams and capabilities. So helping customers figure out what is that phased approach that's going to allow them to gain momentum and show value along the way. Really excited to jump into the content supply chain discussion. Most of my focus is on the process optimization and adoption side of things.
Thank you guys again for being here. So the title of this episode, I'm going to do my best Cuba Gooding Jr. Jerry Maguire impression, is Show Me the Value. So we've talked in the first 2 episodes about what is the content supply chain and what are some of the challenges that customers and businesses are facing. How do we start to optimize the content supply chain? So what is the path to success with content supply chain optimization, and what's kind of the point of entry for that? And here we're really getting more into the nitty gritty about how do we show value, right? So we understand our customers need to justify and quantify the investments that they're putting into technology, into people and process optimizations. So that's the key question we want to start with here today. And Julian, would love to go to you. Just how are we starting to define the term value in CSC, content supply chain optimization?
Well, I mean, value is super individual for each and every organization, right? I mean, when we're talking about content supply chain, it is first and foremost about a process, right? The process of creating content and releasing content and introducing more efficiency to it. This is why you probably engage with Adobe, right? So when we talk about value, we really have to understand, like, what is your main goal you want to achieve? Is it to be more efficient, by the way? Do you want to have faster time to market, release more content? Are you looking to have less content waste, for example, which is quite common, some of the things we see? Or just overall, do you want to personalize your content more? What is your main goal? We can achieve all of that by engaging with you and actually engaging with organizations and supporting them. So value, it's a very individual thing. But I would generally say if you think about content supply chain, which is, and we talked about that in the last episode, is something that every customer already have. Like everyone has already the content supply chain in place. It's already working. You're already releasing content, creating content. You're already working on that day by day. The initial value you see by making this process more efficient is you will gain speed. Speed in releasing content, speed in creating content, speed in the way your individual workforce is working. That is one of the immediate values you will see once you improve the way you work on a day-to-day basis. And this will actually improve your employee satisfaction. It will increase your content throughput and also the relevance of your content to your key audience. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed answer, right? It is very personal, very individual, but it's also something that will definitely increase your efficiency once you touch content supply chain.
Yeah, love that. And, it's always cliche, right? It's mixed. It depends on the business, depends on the customer expectations and their maturity. So, Doug, expanding upon that, what are we seeing kind of from a strategic point of view of how customers are trying to articulate value when they optimize bits of their content supply chain?
You bet. We're starting to see a lot of patterns develop, Elliott, which is nice because otherwise it gets kind of infinite, like you suggested. But I think the baseline is what Julian talked about, is that there are operational gains to be made. There's always like spot improvements people can make in their processes. There are always areas of the content supply chain that are not quite working well internally, and that are putting obvious pressures on certain teams or team members to keep up. And when you couple that with longer term strategic goals, like increasing your reach globally, for instance, which implies lots of steps you'd want to take in your systems and ways you'd want to integrate global teams, you're dealing with one set of problems. If you're trying to consolidate and optimize sharing in your system to reduce waste or to improve conformance to lower risk, you're dealing with another set of problems on reusability, and we see that as a major driver. And then there's also a sort of hyper-personalization track where you're trying to reach more customers through more touch points and more channels in a coordinated way, and that puts different pressures on the system that we also we see. So it feels like the baseline is operations, and then you have there's longer story arcs related to those other big goals, and those reflect, operational or organizational strategies for our clients.
Excellent. And Ann-Katrin, I know you're working with a lot of great customers right now. Any experience from the field or from the front lines that you can share? What are you seeing in terms of value and what customers are realizing through content supply chain? And do you agree with some of the drivers that Doug and Julian have listed out?
Yes, definitely. So maybe one of the most interesting value drivers or what are the most interesting values that customers were looking for was really the sustainability of content. So making sure that everyone knows what they're doing and why they're doing it, why they're creating certain assets, certain content, and doing it in an aligned way, so you don't have so much content waste produced, right? So I think that was the probably most surprising way to look at it, not only environmental sustainability, but also content sustainability, which of course, is a part of environmental sustainability as well, right?
Yeah, sustainability is key. That's a good part. And waste, are we wasting content? Do we waste content around here? I don't think so, right? We're keeping it real. Well, talking about waste, I think there's ways to measure that, right? So I think what I've heard from some of the customers is that we know that we're wasting content, or we know that we're inefficient, but we can't quantify it, or we can't showcase how we would improve that. So what are some strategies that customers can adopt to help quantify and ultimately measure the performance of their content?
Well, I think measuring is a good start, right? I mean, the problem with understanding how much content you produce versus how much content you actually use in the end is if down the line of a content supply chain from production to distribution, you don't really know what ends up in your digital channels because you have siloed teams, you have siloed applications, for example, and you have no feedback on what assets are used where, what content is used where, but also no feedback on what content is actually useful for my organization, because that's the type of waste we have to consider as well. Is the content relevant? There's a lot of content being produced that might be even out there, it might even be released and distributed, but it doesn't create any use for you. It's not useful because it's just out there and nobody looks at it, right? That's content waste as well. So we're not only speaking about content that has been created but never been released, we're also speaking about released content that is not useful for an organization. So measuring the effectiveness of content, but also measuring where your content lives and where it actually gets distributed is one very important piece. And this can be done in a multitude of ways. It's the standard analytics that you could do with Adobe Analytics, for example, but it could also be something like connecting your teams more, having a centralized work management platform that gives you oversight. Talking about the transparency that Ann-Katrin just talked about is a very important piece as well. Everyone down the line has to know what content has been produced so that they can actually start using it. If I don't know there is some content for my use case, for example, I will never use it and probably create a duplicate or create multiple duplicates in the worst case, right? And this wastes a lot of time, this wastes a lot of effort, and it actually reduces, again, the value that I get out of my content supply chain, the time to market, the reusability, transparency, data democratization. There's a lot of things that get reduced if you do not know what content has been produced, what content has been planned, and if you do not feedback the analytics of your already released content into your next planning cycle to understand what do I have to improve now in order to not do the same mistakes twice. So that's one of the points. But I see Doug is nodding the full time, so I probably think he has some points there as well.
Super appreciative. Tom's clapping.
Yeah, I can jump in. I was going to say when we talk, so I completely agree with everything Julian said. And when we talk about measurement, to me, there's first the step around management. And, as the famous management adage says, what's not measured cannot be managed. So when we talk about management and content supply chain, we're really talking about supplier management. Do you understand agency spend? Have you optimized your agency spend? Do you understand your supplier ecosystem more broadly? Performance management. So how is content actually performing across channels or in market? Workflow management, which of course is going to be that end-to-end process. Do you understand where the bottlenecks are? If there are particular phases that take long, why is that? Is it a resource issue? Is it an approvals issue? And then lastly, asset management and managing that entire content creation ecosystem. So, when we talk about measurement, to me, it's really supplier, performance, workflow, and then the assets themselves. And that's what a lot of our customers are coming to us to optimize around. And I just wanted to also add in, we haven't talked a lot about change management or driving adoption, but I know in a lot of our conversations preparing for the podcast, that came up quite a bit. And when it comes to measurement, I think there's also a component of measuring organizational change and understanding organizational maturity. And that's where things like change management and helping to drive adoption are going to come into play. So just wanted to insert that in the conversation. And, again, I think when it comes to measurement, it's inextricably linked to management as well.
Kathryn, those are such great points. Yeah, and it's not always just about the technology, right? Like you mentioned, it's about the change management. How do we enable adoption across an organization? So, what else is there besides just measurement of those key aspects and adoption of technology? What are some other pieces that we can do and that we as Adobe Professional Services are helping our customers do to achieve kind of a value plan?
One of the things that we do a lot, since we're asked to do a lot of value mapping for large publishing projects and large publishing initiatives, is to come up with attribution models that not only, define operational gains, but also define customer impacts or business impacts to be achieved, along with those customer gains or through those efficiency gains. I think that the trickiest part of that is to say what kinds of lift we are expecting for which kinds of customers at which touch points. And Adobe's very practiced at doing that kind of analysis, as well as the operational analysis, and at gathering measurements from a wide variety of touch points in the system and integrating that value picture back for customers. And the more our Adobe stack extends, the more measurable and integrated those touch points are, I think, in the best in the best picture. So what we like to do is draw, pictures out beyond the immediate purview of like sites or workfront work and into the other kinds of orchestration that we're also capable of. And we want to take, customers along with us in that direction.
If I may, I would like to add one point that is maybe in between what Doug said and what Kathryn said, and that's really diving deep into the processes that work within our customer organizations, right? They have processes. We never know, when maybe they even don't know how efficient they work. So it's all for us as one step about transparency. Work together with them to understand how they currently work, how the process is evolved, who's doing what, and together with them, and that is usually when we do workshops that comes like out of itself, right? That they understand where things can be done in a better way, how we can design leaner processes. And I think that's key, right? Show transparency of how processes work, and together with them in a very consistent way, see how they can be improved. And that kind of connects the strategy with then, of course, if we change processes, we need to think about change management as well, right? To involve people to see that they have the right skills at hand. So I think that's the process topic is something that really connects the strategy and the change management as well.
Yeah. It feels like we're kind of building tools for governance and for management that we haven't had before in the ecosystem. And that now we're sort of helping automate a lot of the end-to-end planning that goes into the system as well. So now you can look forward and you can resource for things that you might not have been, your horizon wasn't as long, I think, a few years ago. And now we've got the layer in place that's going to allow that to happen better, especially with Workfront.
So echoing kind of how I started this, right, with my poor Cuba Gooding Jr. impression, show me the value. When can customers expect to see value, right? Is it all at once? Do they have to wait, years before they see and realize improvements and value add? How do we articulate value throughout the course of an engagement?
It's an interesting question. One client I'm working with now wants to do a fairly small series of plays in order to build up to a transformation, maybe another 36 months away. So rather than start with the sort of transformation step, they want to do some proofs of concept for how to look at their systems and how to think about customers in new ways that they know they need to do, and then begin to generalize it out and turn it into a fuller publishing program. That's one way we see it happening. We see people want to go straight at the processes.
Yeah, but I can definitely confirm what Doug says. So when we show what can be done in terms of content supply chain, everyone's impressed, but also a bit intimidated. So for me, it's always key to have a balance of saying this can be the vision, right? That can be the big picture, but we can take you by the hand and go one step after the other. So we can kind of chop this into little pieces and make sure we structure them by value, start with the things that give you most value with maybe least disruption. And then we build on this, right? We let you grow with the change that we introduce together with you. That's really something that's absolutely key with all customers I was talking to so far, because it doesn't matter if you talk to companies, big or small, they have respect for what's coming their way. So it's important to see how can we approach this in small steps.
I love that. And I think just to add to that, because that's a brilliant point, is I keep repeating myself, and everyone that speaks to me about content supply chain has heard this sentence before, but there is not one big content supply chain in nowhere, right? There's a multitude of processes. Like there's one big content supply chain probably that sits us like on a global level as an overarching work process, but it is split into smaller sub-processes, which are content supply chains in itself. So if you think about these smaller sub-processes, you could pick one of those as one of the starting phases that Ann-Katrin just described and start working on them, increase the value there. And that gives you a lot of internal value for your change in itself, because you will, by making the life easier for your creative team, for example, transform them ideally into some sort of evangelists that actually help you to convey the story of an improved work, of a more efficient way of working to your organization. You actually drive adoption by starting small and scaling up. Of course, it's always fair to also say we have a big transformational project anyways. Let's transform the full content supply chain right now because we are in the midst of it. And we are capable of doing that. Adobe is capable of supporting you throughout a huge change as well. But we also like to start small and grow with you and just expand from there. And that's a phased approach that you will see in our service offerings, that you will see in all the success stories that we have, that you see with when you engage with us. We will talk about individual processes and scale from there. It's always a phased approach for us, but we do not fear the big bangs as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here as well. I think, when it comes to content supply chain, one of the biggest questions that our customers have is, where do I get started? How do I get started? And so before we even jump into any of our phasing, so we focus a lot on organizational readiness, establishing content foundations, then we start to scale across different channels, and then lastly we get to our transformation phase. But before we have any of that discussion, it's really important to define the limits of the program for those first initial phases. So things like the pilot that Doug was talking about. And so I think when it comes to narrowing, most of our customers are focused on maybe one campaign, one set of must-win experiences, or they might focus by business unit, or if we're talking about workflow optimization, one part of the process first, or an end-to-end, but again, just for one product area or one business unit. And so I think really what that comes down to is picking something that's going to be impactful enough to justify the spend and the ROI, but also picking something that it has high likelihood of success to gain that momentum within the organization. And then going back to the measurement conversation, that's a good opportunity to establish those baseline metrics and KPIs for the transformation itself. So we talked a lot about measurement for content supply chain, but it's also important to set up that governance and structure around the transformation. So, I think that the real thing I'm trying to emphasize there is it's worth it to take a beat and get really, really clear on what success is going to look like in those initial phases. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by narrowing, again, by campaign or business unit or some other way of adding structure around it.
Yeah, or your own roadmap, right? I mean, think about customers that are already in the midst of a change. They're introducing an e-commerce system. They're probably switching to a new content management system as we speak. So why not throw content supply chain in there as well? It will touch those endpoints anyways, and it will make it even more efficient, even more useful for everyone, and even more fun to use for your workforce. So you have this adoption anyways because you're introducing a new tool right now. Let's think about content supply chain in the same movement, because this will you have change anyways. There's no harm in introducing a little bit more change and probably improving your processes as well. In fact, since your entire workforce, everyone that is involved in this project is anyways already used to the change because they already know they will work with a new system in 2, 3, 4, 6 months, they will also probably be more open to adjust to new processes in the same movement. So if you have a big change on your roadmap anyways, if you probably want to introduce a new content channel or anything like that, think about content supply chain. Reach out to us, talk to us. I mean, that's really a good way to start as well, because you already have it planned.
Yeah, the roadmaps are a really good point.
Exactly.
Excellent. What a great discussion. So value is there. We shouldn't just bite off every bit of the apple and try and showcase it all at once, right? Phase it out, start small, get evangelists within the organization. It's not just all about technology, right? There's a people, a process component as well. Make sure that you have willingness to accept change and you have that planned out, and make sure it's on a roadmap, right? These are all excellent points. And Julian, you stole my thunder there because we're closing it out. But if you do want to learn more about this, do please reach out to Adobe Professional Services. You can reach out via our website or intake forms or some of the QR codes that you'll see floating around our heads on the video or at the end of this podcast. But do tune in for our next episode in our content supply chain series on our Experience Means Business Adobe Professional Services podcast. You can find that on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. But until next time, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let us know what you think by writing to us at infoacs@adobe.com. See you later for more.